No, man, I enjoy playing in New Jersey. We spent a lot of time in New York. I enjoyed Orlando. Yeah, man, like Keyon Dooling is just a man. Part about it is the antitrust laws and things like that with college, right? Because if you treat those guys, because it is pay for play now, but if you have a union, if you have all these different things, they can't continue to, you know what I mean, exploit.
All right, today we got my brother Keyon Dooling in the
sir.
house. Brother, thank you for doing this.
Of course, man.
I'm a big fan of yours.
Likewise.
And the more I get to know you, the more I realize the type of person that you are. You've had a lot of influence on me, and you're an amazing father, and I see that. And you've gone through your stuff.
Yeah,
no doubt.
for sure.
No doubt. But talk to me about who Keyon Dooling is and where did you come from? Because I know where you came from, but I think people need to understand where you truly came from and everything that you faced and the adversity that you faced and then making the NBA. But let the audience know who Keyon Dooling is.
Man, so Keyon Dooling is very simple, right? You know, I stand on the shoulders of the ones who came before me. My grandfather and my father, my parents, my uncles, my aunts, you know, my siblings, you know, my community. Like, they really helped shape me and grow me and mold me and encourage me and hold me accountable. So I'm thankful for, you know, that part of it. But simply, like, you know, to put that all like in a nutshell, man, like, you know, awesome in some ways, had failures in other ways, right? But still resilient, still, you know, authentic, and still a survivor.
What would you say growing up was what had the biggest impact you growing up?
Wow. What had the biggest impact of growing up?
Yeah.
It's hard to pinpoint one thing, but I would say it's a combination of things. And if I could categorize it and put it in simple terms, it was like, you know, our faith and our love for, you know, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Right? I would say it was family because, like, you know, all my great memories as a child, you know, had something to do with family. So it was faith, family, and, you know what I mean, survival, really. And I didn't grow up like in extreme poverty, right? There was times where we were considered like hood rich because my father was an entrepreneur and he worked a job, and my mother was an educator and educated. So we did really well, man. Like, I grew up with a pool in the backyard, a big screen TV, fight parties, you know, holidays where, you know, you would have, you know, 50 to 80 family members and things like that. And so we, you know, we were able to navigate and ride those waves. But, you know, like, to answer your question, Andy, like, who am I, who I grew up as, who I am, I'm just Keyon Dooling, you know, with all my layers.
Right. So how did you get introduced to the game of basketball?
So basketball was in my blood, man. My older brothers played basketball. My dad was a fan of the game. He played basketball as well. And I just got introduced to it at a very early age. For me, um, man, I had some natural talent with it. I don't know if it was talent or if they were training me like while I was in the tub as a toddler, you know, because I had pictures like dunking the basketball in a bathtub, right, butt naked, right? So seeing my big brothers, you know, play the game, and my big sister play the game, my dad and his passion for the game, and just the community that we grew up in, like, basketball was just like a part of our family. So we did a lot of, you know, going to games at high school games. I got to see, you know, Eddie Jones play. My mom taught Mitch Richmond in high school, some of the great players who came from Broward County.
Right.
So, like, it just was a part of my DNA. It was something that I was naturally gifted at, something that I was naturally interested in, and I just kind of continued to, like, cultivate it and develop it.
Did you see yourself playing in the NBA?
Absolutely, man. I learned the art of visualization, Andy, very early. I just believe if you can close your eyes and visualize it, you can open your eyes and realize it.
Yep.
And a lot of times when I couldn't go to the park or I couldn't, like, you know, move around or have anybody to play with, like, I could imagine defenders there. I could imagine the basket. I could imagine the situation. So I was a very visual person, at an early age, I had like this ability to imagine.
Right, right. Did
Right.
the game come easy to you?
At parts, it did. Like early, like I could dribble the ball very well early. My brother would like line shoes up in the room, and we would dribble through
Sure,
them.
sure.
Right, and so I learned. Like they taught me, they were training me. When in my infancy. So that part of it came pretty easy to me. As I got older, the game got more difficult for me, especially because I didn't hit my growth spurt
Sure.
until about mm, 10th, ninth, 10th grade. I kind of hit a different growth spurt, but I had a good ground game. Man, they would record like Georgetown versus, Villanova, and we would watch hoops all the time in the house, and then we would play double dribble or
I remember playing double dribble
yeah,
on
man,
Nintendo.
like man,
Yeah, man,
we
I
would
remember
play
that.
these games.
Yeah, I used to
and
play with the Celtics.
oh, you got to be man. So like,
You
man,
just reminded me. Wow,
man,
you took me back.
my big brothers really did a great job of cultivating like my basketball talent and showing me the way and protecting me. And so
Right.
I always have, a certain amount of love and respect and appreciation for the way that my father, my brothers, and also my sister, because she played basketball as well. They cultivated my talent.
Got it, got it. So you're a South Florida legend.
Yeah,
One of the
okay.
highest
Yeah,
drafted players.
Broward County Hall of Fame,
100%, 100%. So
For
you
sure.
ended up first at Dillard, right? And then you transferred. No, I'm sorry,
Gibbons,
and
Cardinal
then you
Gibbons.
transferred into Dillard.
Mhm.
But talk about a little bit about your high school experience playing here in South Florida. That whole experience. I saw a clip of you the other day. I'm actually gonna put it up because I thought it was so cool
We
to watch you
should.
play. Yeah,
Yeah, for
It
sure.
was so good. But talk about your experience playing basketball here, and talk about where South Florida basketball is today, because we're on the map again
Okay,
when it comes to basketball.
Gotcha. So my experience, first and foremost, like the reason why I went to Cardinal Gibbons is because like as a freshman, I wanted to play varsity. And I wanted to go, to Dillard High School, of course.
Of course.
Initially,
Yep.
it's my district. It's where I'm from. It's where my mom and my dad and my family went, and played and, participated. And it's the place that like felt like most at home. But I wasn't far enough along in my development. And so I wasn't going to be able to play varsity. Cardinal Gibbons saw something in me. They was going to give me an opportunity to play varsity. And so I kind of went that route. And it was so difficult, for our family, making that decision.
But
Making that decision, man, I saw my father have to go through so many things because, a lot of times when you come from certain communities, man, like, if they cultivate you, they develop you, and they incubate you, there's a certain, result that they want from that. And for me, it just wasn't the right thing at the right time. And my
it's
dad,
almost like you're going against the family, right?
not just the family, dude.
Community.
It's the community,
Right,
right? And very
But what I
influenced.
meant in terms of the family, like kind of like the mafia, like you never go against the family.
Yeah,
Kind of like that.
yeah. It was a difficult decision to make, but it was the right decision for me to make because academically I was behind. I didn't know it. But when I got in that private school education, man, like academically, I started to develop.
Sure.
Which served me once my talent kind of caught up with my academics.
Sure.
But it was very difficult, in particular on my dad, because my dad like was known around Fort Lauderdale of being a Dillard guy.
Got it. So going through that experience, would if you had to make that decision again, would you?
Yes.
You would.
Yeah, I would do it, 10 times out of 10.
Wow.
Yeah, I would do it 10 times out of 10. Hey, man, it really stretched, you know what I mean, my worldview. It helped me educationally. Man, I went through some tough times at Gibbons, man.
Yeah.
I really did. I had to, endure, some people who, had prejudices or racism towards me. I was on a scholarship there as well, so there was some, social dynamics that was playing into it. And also like I wasn't in the in crowd at that point, right? So I didn't get to be around my friends and things like that. So it kind of isolated me for a second.
Right.
But it also insulated me to a degree as well.
Got it. So you mentioned a word there, racism, which is a very hot topic button right now.
Mm-hmm.
What's your feeling in today in the world that we live in? Because it's used a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and I think sometimes it's used, and this is just my opinion, in a way because you don't have an argument or you can't defend an idea. It's just easy to call somebody a racist. Um, there's been instances where I have seen racism, me personally,
Mm-hmm.
but I want to from your lens, like what are your thoughts on racism? Because you said you experienced that through high school,
Yeah.
at some capacity. How do you see it today?
Well, you know what? It's not just high school where I experienced it. I have experienced it in this
Right.
country. I think, the majority of black men in this country can say that at some point in life they have experienced that, right? A lot of times people don't want to hear that perspective and, you know what I mean, that dynamic,
Sure.
but it is a real thing and a reality that we experience. And it's not unique just to us, right?
Yeah,
So I'm not
sure,
saying
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But those things and those ideas are out there. Those institutions and those structural things are out there. And sometimes you do come across those things,
Right.
right? And it shapes you, it has an impact on you. But the beautiful thing about like the United States of America is that you have an opportunity to get to know people outside of how you look, right? And the bond that I've built and the relationships that I've built, I don't like treat everybody as a monolith.
Right.
I
Right.
treat them as individuals.
Sure.
Yeah, of course, there are things that like need to be done better. There are spaces that need to be created for people to be able to share that experience. But I think it's a very limiting way of navigating, the future,
Right. Sure.
right? Because I think, historically people have like been in buckets and pockets and things like that, but now like everybody like has different experiences that they collide with together.
I just think it's human nature, right? Where racism is going to happen regardless of whatever advocacy and we try to do, and it's changed a lot from the '60s to where we're at today. My not argument, but my position on it is it does exist, but it's not inhibiting you from being successful in this country. And that's kind of been my position. Listen, I'm first generation American, Cuban, I'm brown. Do we have the same opportunities as a white privileged kid? I like to think that I do, but maybe I'm being naive to a certain extent. But I do think that uh, people are using it too much of a crutch.
Yeah, I feel you. I understand your perspective on that.
Yeah.
And like your perspective is your perspective,
Right.
and you've been able to like really, like, have success in this space,
Sure.
right? For me, man, most of the people who I've kind of came up with, haven't had the experience, the life experience, the life journey, the travels, the resources that I've had, so they experience it a little bit different. And a lot of times, for me, you could see it different from somebody who hasn't been exposed
Sure.
to other, environments, right? It's not to say that it doesn't exist. It does.
It does.
It
Yeah.
does. But still, this is the one place, the one country that no matter what you experience aesthetically, you still can find a way. And you have to learn how to navigate those things. And it's not a victim mindset.
Right.
And a lot of times I do hear that, Andy. I
Right.
hear that like, hey, if you're like, from my perspective, I won't
Right.
speak for people. I'll
Right.
speak from my perspective. A lot of times when you're black and you have complaints about what has happened to you,
Right.
it's like, okay, stop crying, get over it. It's not that
Sure.
same time and things like that. And I'll just push back a little bit because there are still some systems that are in place that do make it a little bit more difficult for us to navigate those things.
Sure.
And I would be remiss if I didn't say that
What,
those
what
things.
system? What systems are those?
Well, I mean, you can go back to redlining.
Right.
You can go back to, like name outlying.
Okay.
You know what I mean? If you have a certain name and things like that,
Sure.
you can talk about like, the school systems and the districts and how education is impacted in that. You can talk about policy and policing and how they, police different areas differently. And those are real things.
Right.
And people who haven't experienced that might not know it. So I have to, when we have this conversation, be able to say those things.
Sure.
It is very difficult. It's very different the way that I got policed, in the suburbs when I was living in $1 million house compared to where I was, growing up.
No, yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, if you never experienced it, it's very easy to have these type of positions. But you know, again, I go back to it's not going to change, man. Like it's just not. And like the question I have for you is, how can we empower our communities
Mm-hmm.
to be able to live a life like
I'm so
Keon
gl-
Dooling?
I'm so glad you asked that because, like, instead of us focusing on our differences, we really need to get to know each other
Right.
better and understand our similarities,
Sure.
right? Because there's so many, similarities between somebody, like there's class, right? There's race, there's religion, there's all these different things, and if we're gonna uphold what it is our faith says about like how we treat people,
Absolutely.
like we have to really walk in that,
Yeah.
and it has to be inclusive because like faith isn't unique to a particular group, in my
Sure.
opinion, right? Unless you have like a blood, kind of tied to it or
Right.
whatever. But
Right.
most people from a faith base grow up and have ideologies from how they were raised. Because I went to college, because I traveled to 14 countries, because I have friends who come from different races, religions, backgrounds, creeds, countries, like it allowed me to, be more empathetic, understanding to the culture, to the rhythm, to the cadence, to the food, to the dance, to all the things that like make us unique who we are, right? Without losing that authenticity. And so I just believe we just have to become more like loving and accepting and appreciative of our differences,
Right.
more
Right.
so than focus on the negative part of our differences.
Absolutely. So Cam Newton went, or Jason Whitlock went on Cam Newton's show. Did you get to see that
I saw
podcast?
it. Yeah, I did.
Yeah, and I had told you about it, and
Hmm.
it was a fascinating conversation. And Jason Whitlock was on top of Cam because something in 2016 changed with Cam. He started with the dreadlocks and the way he dressed, and I thought Cam's response to that was brilliant.
Yeah.
He's like, I want to be able to communicate to the people where I came from
Yeah.
and be relatable is the word he used.
Hmm.
So, what's your position on that? Just interaction between the two of them, and what Cam is talking about is a little bit about what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, man.
How do we impact our communities truly?
Yeah, no, that was a beautiful conversation. Look, Jason and Cam have both been very successful in their growth in their industry, right? That like whether you agree with Jason or not, like he's been very successful.
Sure.
Whether you agree with Cam or not, they've been very successful. And they've done it differently, but they've still gotten to that finish line. Like I think that's to be appreciated. And the conversation that they had, right? And they would agree to disagree on
Yeah.
those things
Yeah.
and they would lay them out.
Yeah.
I think, for me, I lean more towards like the way that Cam views things.
Yes.
Because like for so long, man, like, when you talk about the African American experience here in our country, like our hair, our name, our rhythm, our cadence, our tone, and things like that have been, kind of weaponized against us, right? And so like Cam is like he worked his way to a position where he could be totally authentic. Man, he's very intelligent. He's very inquisitive. He's very layered and flawed as well, and he talks to those things. He has a faith base, but he's still like trying to evolve into who he is. Nobody is all good or not all bad, right? And I've known Jason since I was in college. He wrote a piece on me and my high school teammate when we went to the University of Missouri when he was writing with the Kansas City Star, and we had a conversation with him in Bahamas, and I had some of those same like takes on him.
Right.
But like one thing about Jason, he'll stand up in the paint if you agree to disagree. And now he's had a spiritual awakening as well. And so like for me, like, like when you talk about faith, man, like it's like, okay, if this is what you say that you are gonna be, if you're gonna follow like Christian values and things like that, you know what I mean? Like, you have to try to, be open to, understand one, where people are in their walk, in their journey. But two, like you got to live up to those, expectations or commandments that necessarily that come with that.
Do you think Jason takes he's too harsh on the black community? Like he stabs too hard at them?
I think, yeah, I think Jason, you know what I mean, has a perspective on it. I don't know if it's all the way like how he sees it or if he knows that that's what moves the needle. But also, you could be layered. Two things can be true at
Sure.
once. You can see it this way, and I can understand why he says, "Oh, Cam, you should have been clean cut, this, that, and the other." Right, and that's what we've heard all of our lives, right? That you gotta have a certain hair length, or you gotta look a certain way, or talk a certain way, or act a certain way. So it's like telling a demographic of people that you can't be authentic to who you are.
I think you're right, and I think that this whole entire media space has evolved,
Mm-hmm.
and people want to hear from the athlete,
Mm-hmm.
right? And today, how we communicate today is not how we communicated 20 years ago.
For sure.
And that's what Cam has. Cam has a way of connecting with people. Donald Trump, believe it or not, agree or not agree, and we're not going to get into that. But what I am going to get into is Donald had a way of communicating with people that he knew how to connect with them at a human level, right? And that's what Cam brings to the table. That's why I think Cam's the most talented person right now when it comes to sports media. I think it's him, Stephen A. Those are the two guys. And I think Cam is going to, in 10 years, this is going to look a lot different for Cam. I think he's going to be at the top of the game.
Yeah.
He's just so
I
talented.
can see that for him.
100%.
I can see that for him.
Yeah. Jason, man, some things I agree with Jason, some things I'm like, oof.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah,
That's totally okay. Like
Yeah.
like we need those kind of, people in the commentary space. Like Jason didn't come from like just, what I'm saying, like his talent as far as athleticism, because he was a college football player.
Yeah.
Like it was his pen.
Sure.
And he's taken this position for a long time.
Sure.
And there's a demographic within, what I'm saying, like our country that like, appreciates what he does. And there's a demographic that feels some type of way about it. Right. And you could be, layered. Some things I agree with, some things I don't. It just is what it is.
So what do you think about Stephen A. calling or saying that Cam wasn't loyal in that situation with Jason Whitlock? And Ryan Clark had that same sentiment. He put out a tweet talking about that if I'm going on your show twice a week, now you bring my enemy on. Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And like, what's your position on that? Because I me personally, why not have the conversation?
Yeah, I think I think Cam is his own man, right? And I think you have to have a certain amount of status, stature, and resources to be able to be totally authentic and have those conversations. That the conversation that, from me watching it, Cam wanted to talk and address Jason from what he said about him. Right. And they talked about other people along the way.
Yeah.
And Jason was one of those people.
Right.
I believe that as men, man, we earn our right, to have our opinion. Some people can agree with it. Some people can disagree with it. But as long as you have the love and the respect of your family and your peers and the people who, mean most to you, you have to be authentic to that moment. And I think like the way that they handled that was like gentlemen.
They did.
It was a grown man conversation,
100%.
and I like that.
And I think our country needs more of those grown men conversation, grown people conversation, because it's like we live in a world where it's just complete tribalism. If you're not on my team, you're against me. We hate each other. We can't, no, we're gonna have differences, but can we sit across from each other and talk about those differences?
Yeah, man.
And maybe through that dialogue, you can get me to see it the way you're seeing it, or vice versa.
Or agree to disagree, and just respect each other. 100%. And like, look, dude, like politically, you know what I'm saying? And this isn't, we're not going too far. But like, there's things that like we don't agree on
100%.
like politically. There's things in sports and sports figures that we don't see it like the same way. AKA Prime. We don't see it the same way.
Yeah.
But because we've broken bread, because I know you, because we get money together, because we creating, this company that we're building in Beyond Media Group, you know what I mean? Like you see past the differences and you see where you're aligned.
100%.
Right? And like, man, dude, it's just like you have to navigate life, man. Like God is love. You have to lead with love and understanding and things like that. And it's not just like white and black. There's many shades of gray.
100%. I completely agree with that. And I think people are hiding behind keyboards. It is just so easy, dude.
I'm so tired of it.
Yeah, me
too. Sometimes I get tired.
Yeah.
And like if we make a post, right, and there's negative comments, like that first 2 days, I got time.
Right.
And then after that, I'm not going.
But you know what's fascinating? Because I get a lot of hate too because of stuff that I'm talking about, right? So they come after me, and that's fine. I don't care. It used to bother me a lot before, but now I don't even care. Sometimes I don't even answer now. But if you go look at the ones that are really like putting these awful comments, they don't even have a page.
They don't have followers. They don't have their picture, their profile pic, and things like that.
So it almost feels like bots doing it. I don't even think it's real people.
Yeah, man. It's different times, man. We got to kind of keep up with the times. But if you're going to be in the media space, or if you're going to be, a major figure in anything and have influence and power and respect, you're going to deal with some criticism. And so how you handle that, you have to be like totally locked in on your principles, your values, your morals. But also I think you have to have a certain amount of like toughness and pettiness where
They
like
do need to have a little bit of
people think
pettiness.
twice
Yeah,
before they say something to you.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
if they can hide behind
yeah.
like a bot, it's difficult
It's,
to navigate that.
it is. It is. So true. This whole sports media, the sports media,
Yeah.
athletes coming into podcasting. I feel like we're like the West versus East Coast hip hop. Remember when they used to go at each other?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's the type of world we live in between these journalists and now the athletes that want to come in, and the journalists feel like the athletes want to take over what they went to school for and worked their whole entire career. So it's like this Bloods versus Crip type thing in this space right now.
Yeah, it's very, you know what I mean. There's different perspectives of it, and like for too often, like athletes didn't have a voice,
Right.
right? And with the emergence of like social media, the internet, and things like that, and also like the people who came, before who were bold enough to say things, like they're telling their own narrative, and that's dangerous, for journalists who have not have the lived experience. Like athletics is one of the few spaces where you can be an expert in it and be judged by somebody who is not an expert in it.
Sure.
Right? Who doesn't have that same experience as you, that same success in that space as you. And so it's shifting, and yeah, that's part of the time.
Yeah, it's
shifting.
It's shifting. I think a lot of it's for clicks and views, if you ask me.
Well, that's what the algorithm says now.
Yeah.
It's about clicks and views, and historically, it's been the major networks and major newspaper and things like that. But it's just not athletes, who are impacting the way that media has been covered. Because the average person, they're not going and buying the Wall Street Journal or the Miami Herald or the Sun Sentinel locally here anymore. Right. Journalism in itself is like shifting.
Right.
And it's becoming more like content based.
Right.
And you have to be, on the train, or you get left behind.
True. So let me ask you this question. I'll pivot a little bit, but
yeah, go ahead.
You played in Memphis.
I did.
LeBron had some remarks about Memphis.
He's not the only one.
So I wanted to see what your thoughts are on Memphis and LeBron's comments.
Yeah, no, I understand his perspective and, kind of where he's coming from with that. I think a lot of NBA players, when you compare the different cities and all the travel, like Memphis doesn't have the infrastructure in place, and they've been around for a long time, and it's just in that particular city, they haven't caught up with the amenities of the NBA. So to speak. So I understand what the players are saying, from that perspective, but also, understand the like real impact that has in that city.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of people who work at that building. There's a lot of people, what I'm saying, like, who have a sense of pride, in that city. But their attendance is down. You know what I mean? Their hotel amenities aren't that great anymore. And they're not the only city that people talk about like that, but it is the city that people probably feel it when you play in that space the most.
Yeah, I agree. We live in two worlds. We live in the world where everything gets recorded, and then you live in a world where it's the real world, where we're having conversations about every situation possible. Imagine if you had a camera on you 24/7.
Yeah.
You can make a comment about something, and they can...
Yeah.
You can set the world on fire.
It's tough, but, if you ask me, like what LeBron said, would you prefer to go to Nashville or Memphis? I would prefer to go to Nashville.
100%.
And that's not a slight on Memphis. Like, man, the things that I really enjoyed when I played in Memphis is, one, like barbecue. Like the food, like the dry rub barbecue and things like that, and the fried chicken, and,
Where would you rank them in barbecue?
You know what? I think Memphis is overrated in as far as like how their pedigree. I believe that the barbecue in Florida, Texas, are like the most underrated.
Best.
Right? Kansas City has great barbecue as well, and then I'll put Memphis like fourth.
Okay.
With that, just from my travels going to over 45 states.
Sure. So what city did you like to play, other than Miami, because Miami's such an obvious one, and probably LA?
Yeah.
What cities did you like to play?
Other than Miami and LA. No, man, I enjoyed playing in New Jersey. We spent a lot of time in New York. I enjoyed Orlando, more so than the city. It was the people within the organization. But there was no place that I didn't enjoy.
Right.
Like, I could find pleasures and joy out of everywhere that like my journey has allowed me to experience.
Sure.
So Yeah, I mean, like I've even found joy in Milwaukee. I still have friends and relationships in Milwaukee.
Which I
Uh,
hear is miserable, by the way.
Man, you know what? It's not as bad as people think. You know what I mean? Like I would still rank Milwaukee above.
Tuesday night in the middle of January.
Yeah, it's cold. It's cold for sure.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I hear. Uh, I want to talk before we get off here because I know we're up against time. This whole world of NIL,
Hmm.
which you got to experience
Yeah, before it was
before
NIL.
before it was even NIL. And what is a kid from Fort Lauderdale? How does he end up in Missouri?
Hey man, you know what? Good recruiting. Good recruiting. You know they call it NIL now.
Yeah,
But for me, man, like it was, like at that point in our family's life, man, we were really struggling.
right.
Right, we were really struggling. Like after like 1992 when Hurricane Andrew came,
Yeah,
like it's something. It was a shift that happened.
sure.
In my father's business, there was a shift that happened with him being a florist and a sky cap. So times were a little bit tough. Basketball was like kind of gonna be my way out, and I just had to really, lock in and kind of do what was best for me and my family in
Sure.
that situation. When I look back at it, did I make the right decision? Yes, for that time. I think where I really missed the mark is because I left Florida and went to Missouri. Like a big part of my network is there. I live in Florida. And so I don't have a lot of relationships from the people who I encountered in that space. I talked to nobody from who I went to college with.
Wow.
Not
Wow.
one person who I went to college with do I talk with on the regular. And that's a little bit disheartening for
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
Yeah, it hurts a little bit.
So I always tell people about college and universities. I think the biggest thing that they bring is the network that you create, right? Because I think you can learn, and now with AI and everything, you can self teach yourself on a lot of stuff.
Hmm.
But I think the networks that you create is such a big part of going away for college.
It is.
And it sucks that you don't have the accessibility to
Yeah,
these
and,
guys.
and and man, a lot of guys have been successful. One of the guys owns the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah, yeah,
From the Kroenke family, and that was one of the big selling points with being a part of that,
the
University of
Walton
Missouri
family,
family, right?
Yeah.
That you would have these connections and resources and opportunities, but those things just never really materialized for me on that personal level like that.
Right, right. Let me ask you about the one and done. Do you think that's something that should continue in college
No,
athletics?
no, I don't think so. I
And why
think
does it exist?
Well, it exists because, like, I think that there's a systematic way that American basketball players are held back and held to a different standard from every other country, right? They put so many barriers up for us to be able to have access to the opportunities because there's kids who played in college this year who could have been professional years ago
Right,
that are
right.
freshmen, right? When you talk about the European system, like a lot of those guys, when they're 14, 15 years old, they're already getting paid and they can go get paid and still come and go to college,
Right,
right? And
right.
still be considered amateur. But I really truly believe that like the NCAA, because of the way that it's set up, you know what I mean? Like they make it very difficult, to get fair opportunities. And I do believe that players do need to get developed, but if teams could get a player in their system early and develop them and take the European model, you know what I mean? And these guys like have the talent to be able to do it. Like I don't think it should be held back. Kevin Garnett, Tracy McGrady, you can go down the list of guys who went out of high school who had significant impacts, on the NBA game.
Sure.
So I don't think like football, you need 3 years to develop with your body and things like that, like how you need in basketball.
Right, right. So, but the one and done, is that coming from the NBA that's not accepting these guys, or
I think it's a combination. I think the NBA likes when you come in with a college fan base, right? Because like if they like you in college and they connect with you, that helps
Mm,
grow their fan base, and you
right?
get to
That's a
develop
marketing.
them
Wow.
a little bit
Sure,
more, right?
sure.
You know what I mean, and get to evaluate them a little bit more. So I think it's a benefit for the
Right,
NBA to have that. You know what I mean? The hard part about it is the antitrust laws and things like that with college, right?
right.
Because if you treat those guys, because it is pay for play now, but if you have a union, if you have all these different things, they can't continue to, exploit, basketball, which they get television deals,
Right.
they get conference deals, they generate, billions of dollars
Sure.
throughout the course of, every year,
Yeah.
right? And they don't get to participate in that, right? They only get their name, image, and likeness in the collective.
Right.
So it's still one of the, and I'm gonna just keep it all the way 100. It's still kind of a, um, how do I say it without being too disrespectful? It still kind of like has some residuals of exploitation.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, you're not the first person that I hear this from. And you were on the players union. You were the
Yeah.
vice president of the players union,
First
right?
vice president for years.
For years. And like, what were those conversations like in the room? Because I'm sure this is not a point of contention today. Like, this has been a conversation for the last 20 years in
Yeah.
the league.
Yeah, man. It was awesome being in those rooms, with David Stern and a young Adam Silva and all the, great people, around the game who, like help grow the game and take it to another level and, kind of getting the insight from like team owners when you would, have all the teams represented and, they coming from their billionaire
Sure.
perspective and things like that. So those times were great. I learned a lot about the game. I learned a lot about like the impact of it and the percentages of it. And look, I think the game is in good shape personally.
Yeah, you keep saying that.
Yeah, I really I believe the NBA game is in good shape and it's going to continue to grow and get better.
Right, right. I agree with you. I think it is in a good shape, but when you look at the top 5 players, they're all international guys.
Yeah, and that's totally fine, and it's not just the international players are not just top 5 because they're the best. The international players it's a combination. They're really good and they're really talented. Most of them have been developed and got better when they got to, what I'm saying, like our coaching because we have the best basketball, bar none. You can fact check me on that or whatever you want to say. But also the rule change allow international players to be more productive in the game. Because like people wanted to see more scoring, wanted to see more freedom of movement. You know what I mean? The game was going more global in order to expand it. So you did have to start looking at talent, globally to grow the game because like the NFL dominates domestically, but the NBA is more global. And in order for it to be a global success, you need to make sure that that demographic is represented, and all the benefits have benefited international players more so than American players.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I can see that argument.
From the rules. For how early they can go straight out of high school. They don't even have to go to high school.
They're playing pro at 15, 16 years old.
Yeah, so like all those different things that really benefits them. There are some like, things holding American players back. And then we talk about it in such a negative connotation.
Right.
You know what I mean? When we're still the best. Like our middle of the pack players, go overseas and dominate. And it's not to minimize like the overseas players, but like to say American players aren't better at basketball, ain't better hoopers top to bottom than the whole world combined. Now we're talking about one country.
Right.
We're talking about all these other places combined.
Yeah, facts.
They get better when they come here because like we have this rhythm, this cadence, this understanding of the game that you can't replicate.
Sure.
And the rules really benefit international players.
I agree. I agree with all that. It's just a good conversation.
Yeah, no, but look. It just is what it is.
I know how passionate you are about it.
Yeah, man.
All right, so we're gonna wrap up here, but I need a favor.
Talk to me.
I need one KD story from the league.
From the league.
That's not gonna get you in trouble, but I need a KD story.
Yeah,
man.
see, I have to be, I have to be very careful, what I'm saying, with the stories. Okay, I'll give a story. I'll give a story.
All right. Oh,
all right. I'll give a story.
Some of the best stories. Some of the best stories I've ever heard are from this man, but he won't say it publicly. But just give me one.
No, I'll give a story. So like Jay-Z. Like let's talk about Hov, right? Like man, what a kind person. Like every experience I've had with Jay-Z has been very kind. So I got a chance to play pool against Jay-Z at the 40-40 Club when the New Jersey Nets were recruiting me.
Okay.
He was retired from the game, from the rap game a little bit. So, but I got a chance to spend some time with him. Very kind, very pleasant, very insightful, very thoughtful, very charismatic. Dope dude, right? We shared a barber. So, like, the story goes from there. I met him there. I didn't sign with the Nets. I ended up signing with the Magic. Ended up going back and seeing him. Me and Eddie Jones went out to Vegas, and Eddie Jones was playing cards. He was a blackjack player. He was playing. He was at a table by himself. I'm watching him. Jay came and sat down. Jay didn't take a hit on a card. Eddie looked at him like, "Are you kidding me?" So Eddie, gets up, moves the table, and I'm like, all right, Jay, I'm gone. Right? And then fast forward 2 years after that, I'm playing with the Nets, and I'm in we're in London, England, and we're at Asia Diffusia, and I see Jay over there, and so I go holler at him, and I'm just like, hey man, Jay, if you could give me some insight, man, like give me 5 things that like help you become who you are. And so he's giving it to me like he's in his he's in his Jay-Z mode, all that. Next thing I know, I look around, all my teammates are kind of surrounded me and things like that, and I just give Jay a hug and say, man, thank you for taking that time with me. But man, Jay-Z, man, was had a big impact on like what we heard in the locker room, the business moves that he made, and things like that. And he's just always been so kind and such a man of respect. So I got a lot of love for Jay-Z. So that's my like PG.
That's your
version
PG. Yeah, there's a lot of good stories out there.
Yeah, that I can never tell.
Yeah. One day. Brother, I love you.
Love
I
you
appreciate
too, champ.
doing this. And
Of course.
yeah, we'll do more, man.
Of course. Anytime, brother. All right, Andy.
My guy.